All right, we're going to move right into our next demo. And the next one is Outro. Taylor, come on up. Taylor is actually demoed before. This is another side project that he's been working on again, so I'm really excited for you all to see it.
Cool, let's do it. Thank you so much, Andy. Hey everybody, how's it going? So I'm Taylor. I'd like to introduce you to a project that I built called Outro. This is what's called a maker project, which means that there's no formal company here, there's no team of engineers or salespeople. I built it all myself with the help of my designer, Danny, who's in the audience today. Danny? All right, thanks, Danny. Cool, so Outro does one thing really well. It helps teams of all shapes and sizes run a meeting called a retrospective. And the purpose of a retrospective is to step backwards as a team, to reflect, in order to move forwards more effectively. I work at a company called Hello Alfred, and every Friday, at the end of the day, the whole engineering team gets around a conference room for our weekly retro, where we talk about how the week went. So, in this demo, I'm going to teach you how to run a retro, and also show you how you can use Outro to do it. So let's get started. Give me a second while I put this back. All right, so I'm just going to log in now to the home screen. Let's back out. Cool. So first things first, a big part of the retro and the retro culture is about celebration. We're celebrating a week's worth of hard work as a team. And so at Hello Alfred, what we do is we open up some beers and some snacks to kick off the meeting before we go ahead and get started. And then we dive into the retro discussion itself. So let's do that by clicking on the Start Retro button right here. And now we're on the retro board. So we're seeing a list of concerns, but we'll get there in just a second. Let's step back. How do you even run a retro? What does it look like? There are a lot of ways to do it. The format that I've been using for the last 8 years, and the one that I recommend, is called Kudos and Concerns. It's super easy, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's imagine that we're all sitting around a conference room right now, and we have a coworker of ours named Dylan, and Dylan wants to go first. And Dylan says, I want to give a kudos to Maddie this week for giving a killer presentation to the entire company. Everybody loved it. So that's awesome, right? So we're going to give Maddie a kudos by tapping on the kudos button. And as the meeting host, I can tap on this button really as many times as I want. It doesn't matter. They're totally free. Sorry about that. You can't tap as many times as you want, apparently. Okay, cool. So we've given Maddie a kudos. But the point of a kudos is to give a shout out to a team member like Maddie for a job well done. And then Dylan might say, I have one new concern. The concern is that we're not getting enough customer feedback about our MVP before we launch. So as the meeting host, I'm going to record this concern. I'll say, we're not getting enough customer feedback about our MVP before we launch. So thank you, Dylan, for bringing that up. We're not going to discuss that concern yet, though. Instead, we're going to continue going around the room, one by one, to share our kudos and concerns. So we may give a bunch more kudos, right? We may add a few more concerns to the board. Once that's done, we'll then dive into the list of open concerns that you see here and go one by one to discuss them. A concern can really be anything. So let's take a look at an example. This one is from Dan. So Dan says, I don't feel like my team understands how much work I put into my designs when they give me critical feedback. That's a pretty heavy concern, right? And as a team, we're super thankful that Dan brought this up so that we can then discuss it and work to improve. Or, how about another concern? There are no snacks in the office, all right? Obviously a far less serious concern, but still worth discussing and worth trying to fix as a team. It is our job as a team, as we're going through this list of open concerns, to either resolve the concern or assign an owner to the concern so that we can then work to solve it in the future. Let's do that with Dylan's concern that he brought up about customer feedback. So we've discussed this concern as a team, and we decide that Casey is going to own this concern. So let's assign the concern to Casey. And then we'll say that Casey is going to organize a group of friends and family beta testers. Awesome. And now Casey's actually going to get an email about this concern reminding her that she owns it. Let's keep moving on down the list. Let's get back to the snacks concern. So we see here that Chris actually owns this concern, and Chris tells us that this week he signed the whole company up for a Nature Box subscription. That means that we now have snacks in the office, the whole team is super excited, and this is no longer a concern of ours. So we're going to go ahead and remove it. Removing a concern is one of the most important, and it feels the best during a retro, right? Because what it signifies is that as a team, you're slowly but surely getting better. You're incrementally improving, that continuous improvement that you're looking for, and that's what's most important. So now we've gone around the room and we've shared our kudos and concerns. And then we've gone through the list of open concerns and we've either resolved the concern or we've assigned an owner to the concern. And that's the entire meeting. That is what a retro is all about. So it takes about 30 to 45 minutes to run a retro just like this with your team, depending on the size of the team, but then you're done. So I'll go ahead and finish the retro right here. Cool. So to summarize, the point of running a retro is number 1, to celebrate the hard work that your team is doing. Number 2, to acknowledge each other for our accomplishments. And number 3, to identify what is not working well so that we can together work to improve it. I've been doing this for about 8 years now. I highly recommend that you guys check it out and give it a shot. If you're interested, it's just outro.co, or that's outro.co, and that's it. Thank you for listening and thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. So now time for Q&A. So who has questions for Taylor at Outro? Get your hands up. Right here in the middle, and the microphone is on its way.
Hi. In the example you gave where you assign someone something, is there any way that that's looped in of when they're going to report back on that? Or is it just out there and off the retro platform?
Yeah, so what happens now is you assign a concern to an owner. That owner gets an email that tells them, here's the concern that you own, and you're responsible for resolving it by next week's retro. And then when we come back for retro next week, we then discuss the concern again, we check in with you, see if you've done what you needed to do, and then we can resolve it.
So the concern stays open?
It does, yes. So that's one of the keys here, right, is that these open concerns will stay open until they are resolved, right? So you may have a concern on the board for a few weeks at a time before it gets resolved, and that's one of the keys to holding each other accountable.
Question in the back?
Are the kudos documented? If so, or if not, why?
So that's a great question. As I was building this and getting a lot of customer feedback myself, that's one of the most common suggestions. The kudos are not documented. The number is documented, right? So as we're giving kudos to team members, the meeting host is clicking that kudos button and counting it, but there's no recording of the individual kudos. The reason for that is purely just to keep the meeting efficient and keep it moving forward. I think recording the concerns is obviously critically important because you need to check in on them in the future, but the kudos is really just fun. And I can tell you from either personal experience, but also from other teams that are using Outro, we start to compete about how many kudos we can give each other and see how high we can get the number, and that's what's most important. It's not about individuals and how many kudos they've gotten historically, etc. Thanks for the question.
Great, next question. I think we have a hand here.
How do you prioritize the concerns and maybe break it down sometimes? Sometimes the concerns can be pretty big and you just can't do one thing in it.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great question. So the way the concerns are prioritized on the board is in order of recency, so when it was added. And then as a team, you can determine how you want to prioritize going through that list. I know for my team, we start with all the new concerns, make sure we get through those, and then as time allows, we'll go through the older concerns and try and resolve them. There are going to be some concerns that are pretty nebulous, they're large. At times you may want to break them up into multiple concerns, or at times you may just want to come up with one simple action item to make a bit of progress on resolving that concern if it's not going to resolve the whole thing, and then check in on it in the future. So I think one of the great things about the tool is that it allows the team to adapt it to its own needs and figure out what works best for you.
Great. Cool. I think I stand right here in the red shirt. This will be the last question.
Hey Taylor, great application.
Thank you.
My question is there any way that I could see which concerns are assigned to me in a in a simple manner so that I can go through those?
Right. So in addition to the email that you get that will summarize the list of concerns that you own, you then can log in back into the Outro app and see the total list of concerns to see which ones you own. But in short, you get an email summary, and then the top feature request right now is a Slack integration, so hopefully shortly you'll also get pinged in Slack that reminds you there too, but not quite yet.
Great.
Cool. Thanks.
Round of applause for Taylor and Outro.
Thanks so much, guys.
And Taylor will be out at the after party, so if you have any other questions, please feel free to find him.